Guys. So, since we last talked, the Chiefs have signed left tackle, I assume left tackle, Donovan Smith from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're still waiting for some of the information to come out about that. I'm going to talk about that here shortly. But as we do every week here, I am Seth Kaiser. I should probably introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm the Chief of the North, Minnesota Chiefs fan, the man with way too many names and way too many kids and way too many jobs. As we do every week here, I come here on RGR Football, talk about some of the questions that you have related to the Chiefs. You can find me at RealMN Chiefs Fan or my Substack, the Chief of the North newsletter, where we break down the film and try to go beyond the box score. We're past the draft. We are now in the next little mini wave of free agency because what ends up happening is after May 1st, after the draft ends, the free agents that are signed at that point no longer count against the compensatory pick formula. And that can be a big deal because that, you see every year now, teams get themselves a third, fourth, fifth, sixth round pick. And that can be an incredibly valuable asset all on its own, or if someone wants to, utilize it in a trade, etc. So if you're wondering why you might see a little more activity here in the next week or two, why the Chiefs waited until now to sign Smith, which again, we'll talk about shortly. Well, that's the big reason why. My phone decided to ding at me. Let's make sure it's nothing crazy, shall we? Oh, just my wife asking me how I'm doing. That's just terrific. Anyway, I know that's the content you guys tune in here for. So what we do here every week, every Thursday, Friday-ish, usually comes on live on Thursdays. I try to break down some mailbag questions that you guys have for me. We talk about all things Chiefs. If you want your question featured on next week's mailbag, you can get it a little more prioritized by putting it in the comment section below. Otherwise, every Wednesday, I'll tweet asking for people to provide me with mailbag questions. Because I didn't do a mailbag last week, I was on vacation in sunny Florida, and additionally, the draft was ongoing. We don't have comments, mailbag questions, but we do have some from Twitter. So that's what we're going to get to, and I'm assuming a lot of them have to do with the Chiefs' offensive line. I'm excited to get into it. Once we start talking about those things, make sure you hit like, subscribe, do the things that are necessary to support the great crew here at RGR Football. Ryan, Dan, Gary, the whole crew, they do an awesome job, and I'm here too. So let's talk about your questions. We'll get through as many of them as possible, maybe even all of them today. And in the meantime, if you're looking for draft content, I have reviewed the Chiefs' 2 first-round picks in depth. Those film reviews are up on the Chief of the North newsletter. You can check that out. I was in the process of looking at Wanya Morris's film from both Tennessee and Oklahoma when the Chiefs signed Donovan Smith. So I'm going to put a hold on that for a minute and do a probably about 4 games on Smith from 2022 and 2021, just to get an idea for kind of who he was when you chart every snap, see whether there should be any expectations of him being able to win a starting job. Because if he wins a starting job, I would assume it would be at left tackle. But we'll talk all about that. But check that out, Chief of North newsletter, or go to bit.ly/Seth Really Hates Money. Shout out to Josh Briscoe for setting up that bit.ly. Lets you subscribe for $12 a year. All right. Well, let's look at these mailbag questions. George Rakes asks, he says, let's get to the important stuff. Opener next weekend, as in fishing opener. You ready? You know what? And please don't hate me. I'm actually not much of a fisherman. I enjoy it. I'm just no good at it, and I've never taken the time to learn how to be good at it. But I do probably go a dozen times a year with my kids, but nothing too serious. We throw stuff off the dock a little bit, and we don't get too crazy there. So you're almost always just catching, little sunnies, maybe the occasional perch or bass, but nothing too crazy. I do enjoy it, though. Seth Conyers, great first name, Seth, asks, what is Sky Moore's ceiling this year? Offensive Player of the Year? That's what I thought. And he's got a little smiley face there. The ceiling for Sky Moore, I think, is a very competent wide receiver too. I think that's his ceiling. I think he does demonstrate some decent bursts, some decent fluidity in his movement. He's got a solid catch radius. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not he adapts to the Chiefs' offense. Last year, the problems that he had, generally speaking, weren't separating on short and intermediate routes against man coverage. It was more being in the exact right spot and bending the routes where they need to be bent in terms of facing zone coverages. And when Andy Reid doesn't trust you to do that snap after snap after snap, it can be problematic. It's worth noting that when the Chiefs were down multiple receivers in the AFC Championship game, Moore kind of had an opportunity to step up. He had that great punt return, which was, of course, awesome. But he just clearly wasn't quite ready last year. We'll see what things look like with a year of improvement. I like some of his traits. I liked them in college. I like them coming into the pros. I do think the fact that the Chiefs took another receiver is at least demonstrative that they're continuing to double and triple down at the position. So we'll see if he hits that ceiling. I think he's got talent, and it would be great to see. I think him and Rice are going to be somewhat competing for similar roles out of the slot, but we'll kind of see how that goes. Greg P. asked, do you think the complexity of the offense and the need to know every route at each position hurts receivers' development? It seems they don't get much playing time their first year. I don't know if it hurts their development. I think it might hurt their productivity in early years. And I think that's a real question, to ask yourself in terms of, is the juice worth the squeeze there in terms of what we're looking for before guys can get on the field full time. You kind of see the same game plan with most receivers the Chiefs take, and we'll see if Rashee Rice follows this, is that in year one in Reed's offense, they're generally doing more of, the jet sweep, wide receiver screen, RPO on some slants, kind of more basic stuff. And then that role expands as the years go by. We have seen guys come in right away. Now it's usually veterans like a Jeremy Maclin or a Juju Smith-Schuster or Marquez Valdez-Scantling. We've seen them come in and be basically full-time receivers. So it is possible. I think just as a young player, you've really got to show out in that ability to understand the nuance of sight adjustments and reading zones. I think you've got to show that pretty quickly for Reed to put trust in you for that. I don't think it hurts their development, but I do think it makes it harder to produce early on. And so, maybe at the end of the day, you end up with more well-rounded receivers. So in a way, it helps their development, but the development feels slower. And I can see an argument for both, like in terms of simplifying. But I think given the track record Reed has for success with a variety of wide receiver rooms, you can understand. I think what he wants it is that once you learn the offense, there's a baseline that you need, but you can also have multiple guys producing it a little bit. Seth, another Seth, goodness gracious. Feldkamp asks, what the heck are the Chiefs doing with their tackle depth chart? Donovan Smith, I guess a bunch of you asked about this. So Donovan Smith signing, as of right now, as I record this, and I'm assuming this will be different by the time you're watching it, the official numbers on Donovan Smith haven't been released. He was signed for a one-year deal, up to $9 million. But here's the thing, that deal is official right now already. The Chiefs tweeted it out. He signed the contract. What that means is that his contract fits into their current salary cap restraints, and they don't have $9 million available. I thought they were at 4 or 5 million, give or take. And so what that tells me is that a significant amount, at least half of that 9 million, based on kind of our little inductive reasoning thought experiment there, is non-guaranteed and probably in some form of not likely to be earned bonuses. Now, I don't know how they could necessarily do all that because he started so many games last year. I wouldn't think it would be a number of starts, but it might be Pro Bowl, might be all pro, might be starting every snap and making the Super Bowl, things like that. They can build in all sorts of incentives that don't necessarily count against the salary cap if they're unlikely to be earned. So given that it's that phrase up to, because there's a lot of Chiefs fans with a lot of angst about the Donovan Smith signing for what it means for Taylor, who everyone has presumed will be left tackle, and Donovan Smith. I'm sifting through his film now. He had some real struggles last year, and not just in terms of holding penalties, but in terms of giving up pressures and overall pass protection. And his 2021 film, there's a reason I'm going to look at that too, because he supposedly was playing banged up all last year. But a lot of offensive linemen play banged up. And so there's a lot of angst kind of about that. And, the question for me will be more, do I think he could be as good as Brown in pass protection, as good as Brown was last year? And if he can, then at least that creates the idea that maybe he can play left tackle and you keep Taylor at right tackle. I don't really care if they want to keep Jawan Taylor at right tackle, honestly. People talk about paying him about $20 million a year. That is in like the top 3 of right tackle salaries, but it's top tier right tackle salary numbers. And with the way the current NFL works, I don't really have a problem if your best offensive lineman is a right tackle. The Chiefs operated that way for years with Mitch Schwartz, and they were able to game plan around him being an elite pass protector the same way that you can build around a left tackle. Great example of this would be the 2019 Super Bowl. The Niners got a ton of pressure on Mahomes. The rest of the offensive line struggled. Mitch Schwartz played basically a perfect game. He basically played a perfect playoffs, honestly. He pitched a shutout like every week. Because he was playing so great and individually shutting down whatever pass rusher they had working against him the entire game, the Chiefs were able to provide help elsewhere. And so you can do that with your right tackle. And also in today's league, there's a zillion great pass rushers coming from that side, and guys move around all the time. For example, I mean, an easy example, even like a Chris Jones, the sack he had in the NFC Championship game that provided the Chiefs an opportunity to win the game, which of course they did, that he was rushing against the right tackle. And so you can't just count on it. The idea left tackle, pass protector, right tackle, something else, that's just not the same anymore. And so it doesn't matter to me if they want to keep him at right tackle. What concerns me more is whether or not Donovan Smith can play at an average level. If he can play as an average level and you're most comfortable keeping Taylor at right tackle, great. But will he? That's an important question there. And so that's what I'm going to be looking at with that. But that type of contract at least creates some doubt to me as to whether or not it's just a given that he's going to be handed the starting job. I know what's being reported right now is the Chiefs view him as a starter. That's obviously what they're saying, and that's what they're going to say right after signing him. But I do think that training camp, I think some of the OTAs are going to play a pretty big role in how that goes. I don't think the plan would be to flip him to right tackle and Taylor to left tackle. That makes no sense to me. They're both guys that have played predominantly in one position. Switching one guy can be hard enough. Switching both seems very, very, very risky, especially a guy like Smith, who's been playing for years and years and years now, not just 3 or 4 years. But so that I just don't see that happening. That's most of the questions. Honestly, a lot of them are related to that. Lawrence Smith Jr. asks, are the Chiefs done at wide receiver and tackle? I think so. I think they're probably at a point to where they're kind of comfortable. They've got a couple young guys, Prince and Niang that might compete for some stuff. Obviously, you've got Taylor who's going to start at one of the tackle positions, and so then by adding Donovan Smith, they've either added a guy to try to start at left tackle and see how that goes, or a legitimate backup left tackle. So I think they're done there. I think they're probably done with the receiver room as well, barring something really weird happening. Daniel Roth asks, what's your favorite barbecue sauce? I'm going to give a very basic answer and say Joe's because it's unbelievable. It's Brett Veach season asks, what side of the ball benefits most from this draft? My follow-up, any starters from this year's draft? Oh, yeah. I 100% think that FAU is going to start this year. And I think that Morris, I've looked at his film a little bit. I think he's got a potential to be a starting right tackle in the league. And I think Rice is going to be a guy who plays the majority of the snaps because he can play boundary and from the slot. I think in terms of which side of the ball benefited the most, I am going to have to go with the defense just because of the nature of the investment they made with some defensive back spots. And then obviously drafting an edge rusher in the first round. 1987 George Harrison mullet. That's hilarious. Ask, how was Florida? It was awesome. Thank you for asking. I had a wonderful, wonderful time. It was just me and Jazz. Missed our kids, of course, but there's advantages to going on vacation by yourself. Like you can sit at the beach for 3 hours and barely talk and just listen to the waves. I'm a big ocean guy. I love the beach. I love being there. It's just so much fun. Kyle Henning asks, where's the best restaurant you've tried on your Florida trips so far? Well, we go to Anna Maria Island, and there's a little, cafe tourist knick-knack shop called Ginny and Jane E's that serves the best caramel rolls. They call them sticky buns. It depends where you're from in the world, and they're incredible. So I just can't beat that. John Wesley asks, I don't know if you're going to get to the top moments of last season piece, but just in your mind, did the 12 seconds to a field goal before halftime against the Bills make the list? That might make the list. I haven't gotten yet to the most fun moments of the 2022 season. I want to get there. The day job's been a little bit of a grind as of late, unfortunately. And so it's been everything I can to kind of keep up with new things as they come along. But that is definitely on the list. I should tweet out sometime, ask people like what their suggestions are for the most fun moments of 22, because there were so many of them. Scott Lawrence asks, best French fries? I really like Joe's French fries too. I don't know. Joe's Kansas City barbecue is just getting a lot of shout outs during this episode. Andrew Schnitker asked, watch 60 seconds of Isaiah Moore highlights and tell me how you feel about him making the team. I think he's got a shot. It's so early to say in this whole process. With all these guys, you really want to find out how they perform the first week where there's padded practices. And before then, everything's a guess, unfortunately. A heart emoji is your name. That's great. How are you? I'm doing very well. What's Veach's role making sure the scheme keeps evolving? It's not just the same every year. None at all. That's Andy Reid's baby. Especially talking with the same coaches year after year. And then also who will be offensive rookie of the year in the NFL. I'm guessing Robinson will. He's got the name. He's in a position to get a ton of carries in an offense that actually performs really well running the ball. I think he'll run away with it. And again, I just can't emphasize this enough. For Veach, his job is to have good open communication with Reid and Spags and their coaches and understand what they believe their needs are in terms of the framework of the scheme that they're running, and to find guys that fit that, but also fit his framework of who he thinks talented guys are. And that's why it's so tough to be an NFL GM and get it right, because you're not just looking for talented players. You are also looking for guys that fit a very specific mold in what the coaches are going to ask for them based on the current makeup of the team. We just got a couple more questions. Terry Jones, to circle back to Donovan Smith, he said his numbers seem less than stellar. Buck fans were calling for his head last season. How do his sacks, pressures, penalties numbers compare to Brown's? He had a lot more penalties than Brown last year, didn't have nearly as many pressures. What you see from last season, and I want to say, I believe Eric Eager tweeted out some of his numbers in terms of sacks, hits, pressures over the years. His pressure levels, it wasn't Eager. It was actually Farzin Vausugi, and I don't know. I'm sorry, man. His stats from Pro Football Focus, which is something worth keeping in mind, that everyone's manner of charting this kind of stuff is different. So I don't know if they would call pressure the same thing I would call pressure. And I also don't know, maybe I would chart more pressures. Maybe I would chart more losses. So it's hard to say. So in 2022, he allowed 6 sacks, 31 pressures, and 12 penalties. In 2021, he only allowed 1 sack, 30 pressures, about the same, and 8 penalties. So still not a terrific year from that statistical standpoint. But then, I mean, from 2020 and on back, you got 6 sacks, 8 sacks, 7, 3, 4. Now it's worth keeping in mind, playing with Tom Brady versus, a guy like Jameis Winston. It changes things. But generally speaking, PFF tries to factor that in. But penalties have consistently been a problem for him. So we'll kind of see. Yeah, Andy Heck is a terrific offensive line coach, but he's been in the league a long time. He kind of is who he is. So we'll see where that lands. But I understand the concern there. It's just going to be a matter of reaching a certain level of competency, because they've got 4 very good offensive linemen, and they're looking to fill in that 5th spot. All right, we just got one more question, I want to say. Never mind. I've got a couple more. Thomas Haslett asks, what are your thoughts on the starting defensive line pass rush package looks like? Who moves inside? Does Jones still kick outside on obvious passing downs? I think Jones occasionally still kicks outside on obvious passing downs. And the reason he can do that is because of I think their best 4 pass rushers, if things work out how they're hoping, will be Chris Jones, Charles Omenihu, FAU, and he's going to have to beat out Dana or Karlaftis, and then Karlaftis. And that's where Dana kind of comes into play there. Mike Dana was maybe the second best consistently pass rusher on the team last year. The issue is, so they, in theory, if FAU is who they want him to be, they in theory have 5 guys that they really like rushing the passer. Obviously, Jones is the only superstar with what we've seen so far, but Omenihu is a really high-level pass rusher, especially from the interior. From the outside, he's okay, but not nearly as good. From the interior, he was excellent last year. So I think it makes sense to kick him inside pretty frequently, which allows you to be flexible about kicking Jones outside, especially when Mike Dana rushes best from the inside as well, significantly more so He's an above average pass rusher from the interior and maybe a little below average from the edge. And then Karlaftis and FAU are guys who are better suited for outside rushing, generally speaking. But Karlaftis can kick inside as well. So what you're hearing there, FAU is kind of their only traditional guy, I guess you'd call, who is basically an inside pass rusher, in my opinion. I think he's got the power to kick inside a bit, but his explosion and bend is best fit for the actual edge. What's interesting is, the way K-State oftentimes they often rushed three. And so he would be lined up head on with the tackle or even one gap inside the tackle, which makes rushing the edge very difficult. He's hardly ever rushed from like a wide 9 stance or from outside the tackle, which took away the advantage that he might have had in terms of converting speed to power or trying to threaten both inside and outside and bending the edge. So it's a long road to short thought because that's a great question. Like, what does their best group look like? It's always tough to count on rookies to be even competent in their first year. I do really like, though, FAU's skill set and how that translates to rushing from the edge. And so I think tentatively their best grouping is Karlaftis and FAU on the edge and Jones and Amenahue rushing from the inside. I think Jones and Amenahue from the inside is a really, really great tandem. I think that's got potential to do a lot of damage, but I think you also have a guy like Dana who can rotate in. And I actually would not hate, and we haven't seen Spagnuolo do much of this. I would not hate if they borrowed a play out of the Eagles playbook last year, because the Eagles had 5 rushers that they really liked. And what they would do on obvious passing downs is they would often line up with, I guess you could call it a bear front, but you'd have 5 guys on the line and you just rush all 5. And so you're technically in a weird way sort of blitzing because you're sending 5, but they're all just lined up on the line. I think that you could have a lot of success with that because it forces one-on-one matchups across the board. And the Chiefs have 5 guys who, from certain spots, really can win some one-on-one matchups. So I'd love to see them do some of that. And you, Thomas Hazlitt, well done. You got me to nerd out on something that I think is really cool. Our last question, SW asks, why do Chiefs fans poop bricks over every move and draft pick like it's 2006 again? Because that's part of the fanhood experience is zealously talking about and breaking down every single aspect of every single move they make. And that's one reason I think people love this sport so much. All right, that's the time we have. Thank you guys so much. Again, remember to hit like, subscribe, do all those things. Look past the fact that I'm not very good at setting myself with lighting and my camera's usually blurry and all that stuff. I hope you're willing to look up past all that and not take it out on Ryan. Do everything you can to support the good work those people are doing on this channel. I appreciate your time. It is a great week to be a Chiefs fan.